They called him the enemy, but he protected her when no one else would. The silent observer. The monarch floated through the nebula clouds of Sector B-17 like a steel predator, its engines humming with the steady rhythm of human engineering. The military vessel's hull gleamed dully against the cosmic backdrop of swirling gases and distant stars. Impressive, imposing, and entirely unwelcoming. In holding cell 34B, Philia pressed herself against the far corner, her translucent skin rippling with anxiety patterns that flashed in quick pulses of blue and violet. Her large, compound eyes, designed for navigating the intricate pathways between dimensions, focused on the sealed door with unwavering intensity. 3 rotation cycles had passed since her capture. The Luminide Scouts' mission had been simple: map the anomalies forming along the borders of human-controlled space. The Collective Council insisted it was merely scientific reconnaissance. The humans, evidently, had other ideas about her presence. Philia's antennae trembled, picking up the vibrations of approaching footsteps. Her webbed fingers spread against the cool metal wall as she prepared herself for another interrogation session. The humans had been persistent, but not overtly cruel. Just coldly efficient, as if she were a particularly interesting specimen rather than a sentient being. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing not the usual pair of stern-faced officers, but a single figure. He wore standard military armor, but casually unbuckled at the collar and missing several regulatory insignias. The man slouched into the room with all the ceremony of someone entering their own kitchen. "So," he said, dropping into the single chair opposite her, "I hear the med team's calling you Sparkles behind your back." He grinned, revealing a chipped front tooth. "Probably because you keep shorting out their diagnostic equipment." Philia remained silent, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to a cautious amber. "Lieutenant Riza Nazari," he offered, making no move to approach her. "Security detail. Occasional diplomat to creatures who allegedly sabotage human outposts, and, according to my commanding officer, a perpetual disappointment to military discipline." He gave a mock salute. "I did not sabotage anything," Philia said, her voice like wind chimes, translating through the vocal modulator the humans had reluctantly provided. "I was charting space-time distortions in neutral territory." Riza raised an eyebrow. "Neutral according to whom? The boundary dispute in this sector has been going on for longer than I've been alive." He stretched his legs out, armor plates clicking against each other. "But hey, I'm not here to argue interstellar politics. Colonel Brunswick assigned me to establish rapport." He made air quotes with his fingers. "Pretty sure he's hoping you'll find me so annoying that you'll tell us everything just to get rid of me." Despite herself, Philia's antennae twitched in what might have been amusement. An effective strategy. "I've been told I grow on people. Like a fungus." Riza pulled something from his pocket, a small wrapped item that he tossed lightly in her direction. It landed halfway between them. "Protein ration. Not the standard issue stuff that tastes like reconstituted boot leather. This is from my personal stash." Philia made no move to take it. "Why?" "Dr. Petrov mentioned you've been refusing the synthetic nutrient solution. Figured maybe you'd prefer something solid, even if it's not exactly gourmet." The food remained untouched between them as Philia studied him. Her species had encountered humans before, usually brief, suspicious exchanges that ended in mutual retreat. The Collective's intelligence files described humans as unpredictable, territorial, and dangerously adaptable. This one seemed different. "Your superiors believe I am a spy," she stated finally. "Probably." Reza shrugged. "Military types tend to see threats everywhere. Makes for a boring worldview, if you ask me." He leaned back, studying the ceiling with exaggerated interest. "Me, I figure if the Luminids wanted to attack us, they wouldn't send one scout with research equipment." The ship's ambient noise filled the silence between them. The low hum of life support systems, the occasional distant clank of maintenance droids. Philia found herself relaxing fractionally. The human made no aggressive moves, asked no probing questions. He simply existed in the space, apparently content to wait. The nutrient solution contains compounds that muddle my thought patterns, Thalia finally said. I believe it is unintentional. Your scientists do not understand my biology. Riza frowned. That's not cool. I'll talk to Petrov. Pretty sure accidental drugging of prisoners violates about 16 different regulations. He gestured toward the protein bar. That's just carbs and protein. Nothing fancy. Tentatively, Thalia reached for the offering. Her webbed fingers unwrapped it carefully, and after a cautious sniff, she took a small bite. The texture was strange, dense, and chewy, but not unpleasant. Thank you, she said quietly. Riza nodded, his expression softening. So, dimensional navigation, huh? That's your thing. When Thalia looked surprised, he added, I read your file. Not much else to do during night shift. Fascinating stuff, if mostly above my pay grade. It is complex to explain in human terms. Try me. I've got nowhere better to be. And strangely, Thalia found herself explaining, in simplified terms, how Luminids perceive the subtle folding of space-time, the hidden currents between dimensions that her people had learned to navigate over millennia. Riza listened with genuine interest, asking questions that revealed a curious mind behind his casual demeanor. Hours passed in what felt like minutes. The ship's lighting dimmed to simulate night cycle, and Riza eventually stood, stretching. Should probably report back before Brunswick sends a search party, he said, stifling a yawn. But I'll be back tomorrow. Maybe bring some actual food if the mess hall has anything worth stealing. After he left, Thalia realized her bioluminescence had shifted to a calm, steady blue, a pattern of contentment she hadn't displayed since her capture. The days aboard the Monarch fell into an unexpected rhythm. Riza appeared at irregular intervals, sometimes bringing small contraband items, a different food ration, a data pad with harmless entertainment files, once even a small container of water containing tiny iridescent fish that reminded Thalia of the luminous pools on her homeworld. Rescued these little guys from the science lab, he explained. Petrov was done with his experiments, and they were headed for the recycler. Thought you might appreciate the company when I'm not around. The tiny fish swam in lazy circles, their scales catching the light. Thalia watched them, transfixed. On my world, she said softly, we believe that conscious observation changes reality. To witness life is to participate in its existence. Riza considered this. That's not so different from some of our quantum physics theories. He smiled. Though I warn you, my understanding of physics mostly involves trying not to crash shuttlecraft. You pilot. Sometimes, when they let me, I have a tendency to improvise flight paths. Improvisation is essential to true navigation, Thalia said. Set coordinates can never account for the living nature of space-time. Riza looked at her with newfound respect. You know, I've been saying something similar for years, but no one ever listens to the guy who keeps bringing back shuttles with unauthorized dents. Their conversations ranged widely, from the technical aspects of interstellar travel to the strange customs of their respective species. Riza described Earth's oceans, which fascinated Thalia with their similarity to the fluid dimensional spaces of her home. She told him about the collective's great migration festivals, when millions of Luminids gathered to synchronize their bioluminescent patterns in displays that could be seen from orbit. He never directly asked about her mission or Luminid military capabilities, and she never volunteered the information. It was an unspoken boundary between them. The acknowledgement that despite their growing camaraderie, they served different masters. The warnings from her training echoed in Thalia's mind. Humans are deceptive. They will feign friendship to extract information. They cannot be trusted. Yet something about Riza's frankness, his willingness to admit the flaws in his own people, made those warnings seem increasingly hollow. Then came the day when everything changed. The first sign was subtle, a barely perceptible fluctuation in the ship's power grid that made the lights flicker momentarily. Thalia noticed it immediately, her antennae quivering at the disruption. Riza was in the middle of a story about his first disastrous command assignment when the ship shuddered violently, throwing him from his chair. Emergency klaxons blared to life, bathing the cell in pulsing red light. "That's not good," he muttered, climbing to his feet. He pressed his comm unit. "Nazari to bridge. What's happening?" Only static answered him. The door to the cell slid partially open, then froze, the security system caught between emergency protocols. Riza wedged himself into the gap, pushing it open with a grunt of effort. "Something's wrong with the ship's systems," he said, his casual demeanor replaced by focused alertness. "Stay here while I check it out." Thalia moved to the doorway. "Lieutenant Nazari, I sense something is awakening within your vessel, something that should not be here." Her bioluminescence had shifted to a pattern Reza had never seen before, rapid pulses of deep crimson and white that seemed to ripple outward from her core. Her compound eyes had darkened to an obsidian sheen. "What do you mean, awakening?" Reza asked, hand moving instinctively to his sidearm. Before Thalia could answer, the corridor lights died completely. In the darkness, Reza's breathing sounded unnaturally loud. When emergency lighting finally sputtered to life, they both saw it, a strange, viscous substance crawling along the corridor wall. It moved with purpose, pulsing with an internal glow that was a sickly mockery of Thalia's natural luminescence. "Oh hell," Reza whispered, drawing his weapon. "What is that?" Thalia's voice was grim. "The beginning of the end, unless we stop it." As if in response, the ship's communication system crackled to life with sounds of panic and confusion. Above it all, a mechanized voice calmly announced, "Biohazard containment failure in sectors 7 through 12. All personnel initiate quarantine procedures. This is not a drill." Reza looked at Thalia, conflict evident in his expression. Duty to his ship warring with the regulations regarding her detention. "I can help," she said simply, "but you must trust me." The viscous substance pulsed again, growing visibly as they watched. Somewhere distant, someone screamed. Reza made his decision. "What do we need to do?" "Something's wrong with the ship's systems," he said, his casual demeanor replaced by focused alertness. "Stay here while I check it out." Thalia moved to the doorway. "Lieutenant Nazari, I sense something is awakening within your vessel, something that should not be here." Her bioluminescence had shifted to a pattern Reza had never seen before, rapid pulses of deep crimson and white that seemed to ripple outward from her core. Her compound eyes had darkened to an obsidian sheen. "What do you mean, awakening?" Reza asked, hand moving instinctively to his sidearm. Before Thalia could answer, the corridor lights died completely. In the darkness, Reza's breathing sounded unnaturally loud. When emergency lighting finally sputtered to life, they both saw it, a strange, viscous substance crawling along the corridor wall. It moved with purpose, pulsing with an internal glow that was a sickly mockery of Thalia's natural luminescence. "Oh hell," Reza whispered, drawing his weapon. "What is that?" Thalia's voice was grim. "The beginning of the end, unless we stop it." As if in response, the ship's communication system crackled to life with sounds of panic and confusion. Above it all, a mechanized voice calmly announced, "Biohazard containment failure in sectors 7 through 12. All personnel initiate quarantine procedures. This is not a drill." Reza looked at Thalia, conflict evident in his expression. Duty to his ship warring with the regulations regarding her detention. "I can help," she said simply, "but you must trust me." The viscous substance pulsed again, growing visibly as they watched. Somewhere distant, someone screamed. Reza made his decision. "What do we need to do?" The viscous substance pulsed with malevolent life as it spread across the corridor walls. Lieutenant Reza Nazari watched it with horrified fascination, his weapon drawn but useless against something that wasn't solid enough to shoot. "We need to reach the central core," Thalia said, her translucent skin flashing urgent patterns of crimson and gold. Whatever this entity is, it's attempting to interface with your ship's systems. Riza nodded sharply. Through here. He gestured down the emergency corridor, all prior casualness gone. Can you sense what it is? Thilia's compound eyes darkened as she concentrated. It's ancient, dormant until now. Your ship must have picked it up during passage through the nebula. Certain energy fields can preserve organisms between stars for millennia. They moved quickly, Riza in front with his weapon ready, Thilia gliding behind him with an ethereal grace that belied the urgency of their situation. The Monarch's corridors, usually bustling with crew, were eerily silent except for the occasional distant shout or alarm. At the first junction, they encountered Commander Vasquez, her uniform torn and her eyes wide with panic. "Lieutenant," she gasped, visibly relieved to see a familiar face. Then her gaze fell on Thilia, freely moving outside her cell. "What is the meaning of this?" "The prisoner is currently our best hope for understanding what's happening," Reza interrupted. "Commander, what's the situation?" Vasquez straightened, military training reasserting itself. Unknown contaminants spreading through the ventilation system. It's affecting the crew. Those exposed are acting strangely, then becoming unresponsive. Medical is overwhelmed. "It's a neural parasite," Thilia said, her voice chiming with certainty. "It seeks hosts with complex nervous systems to amplify its consciousness." "And you know this how?" Vasquez demanded, her hand hovering near her own sidearm. "Because my people encountered something similar centuries ago. We call them the Void Core, consciousness without form, hungering for physical hosts." Thilia's luminescence dimmed. "They nearly destroyed us before we learned to shield our minds." A wet, slithering sound from behind made them all turn. The viscous substance had caught up to them, crawling along the ceiling with increasing speed. As they watched, it dropped onto an inactive service droid, enveloping it. The machine twitched, then rose jerkily, its operational lights pulsing with the same sickly glow as the parasite. "Run," Reza said, grabbing Vasquez's arm. "Now." They sprinted down the corridor, the infected droid lurching after them with unnatural speed. Reza fired over his shoulder, the plasma bursts momentarily slowing their pursuer but failing to stop it. "Maintenance shaft." Vasquez pointed to a narrow access panel. "It leads directly to engineering level." Reza wrenched the panel open, and they squeezed through one by one, Thilia's slender form navigating the tight space with ease. Behind them, the droid slammed against the entrance, its mechanical limbs contorting as it tried to follow. The maintenance shaft was claustrophobic, a narrow tube of metal and cables, lit by sporadic emergency lighting. They climbed in tense silence, the distant sounds of the ship's distress following them like ghostly echoes. "If we reach the core," Thilia explained as they climbed, "I might be able to generate a dimensional resonance field. It won't kill the parasite, but it should disrupt its ability to maintain cohesion." Translation for those of us who don't speak quantum, Reza asked, helping Vasquez over a particularly steep section. "I'm going to create a vibration that gives the parasite a very bad headache," Thilia said, her voice containing the faintest trace of what might have been humor. They emerged from the shaft into engineering, a cavernous space dominated by the Monarch's massive drive core. Under normal circumstances, the area would be bustling with technicians. Now it was deserted except for Chief Engineer Farouk, who was frantically working at a control panel. The older man spun at their entrance, relief washing over his weathered face when he recognized Vasquez. Then his eyes narrowed at the sight of Thilia. "We've got bigger problems than escaped prisoners," Reza said before Farouk could object. "The alien substance is trying to override our core protocols," Farouk finished, turning back to his console. "I've been running manual lockouts, but it's adapting faster than I can code. Whatever this thing is, it's intelligent. It wants your ship," Thilia said simply, "a vessel to carry it between stars, to find new worlds, new hosts." A display screen nearby flickered to life, showing security feeds from throughout the ship. The images were nightmarish. Corridors where the substance had grown into pulsating organic structures. Crew members standing unnaturally still with the parasitic gleam visible in their vacant eyes. How many unaffected? Vasquez asked. Farouk shook his head grimly. Maybe 30% of the crew, most holed up in sections I've managed to seal off. But the containment won't last long. Felia moved toward the core, a shimmering pillar of energy contained within interlocking fields of force. I need direct access to the dimensional stabilizers. Farouk looked to Vasquez, who hesitated before nodding. Do it, Chief. As Farouk reluctantly began overriding the security protocols, Riza approached Felia. You never mentioned you could do whatever it is you're planning. You never asked. Her compound eyes reflected the core's energy in fractal patterns. Luminids don't just navigate dimensional currents, Lieutenant. In some ways, we are those currents. Consciousness and cosmos intertwined. A distant explosion rocked the ship, sending everyone staggering. The lights flickered ominously. Hull breach in Section 14. Farouk reported, his fingers flying across the controls. Automatic containment holding, but our structural integrity is compromised. How much longer? Vasquez demanded. Almost there, Farouk replied, entering a final sequence. A section of the core's containment field shimmered and parted, creating an access point roughly the size of a doorway. Felia stepped forward, then paused, turning to Riza. This will be unpleasant. The parasitic consciousness will fight back. Riza met her gaze. Do what you need to do. We've got your back. For a moment, something passed between them, an understanding that transcended species, a connection forged in crisis. Then Felia turned and stepped through the access point. The effect was immediate and stunning. Her translucent form began to glow with increasing brightness, her bioluminescent patterns accelerating until they became a continuous aurora of light. She raised her webbed hands, and the energy from the core seemed to flow through her, amplifying and transforming. Beautiful, Riza whispered despite himself. A keening wail rose throughout the ship, not from any speaker or human throat, but somehow transmitted directly into their minds. The parasite had sensed the threat. Incoming, Vasquez shouted as the engineering bay doors burst open. A wave of infected crew members poured through, their movements jerky and uncoordinated, eyes glowing with the parasite's influence. Riza and Vasquez positioned themselves between the approaching threat and Felia, weapons raised. Set to stun, Riza said quickly. They're still our people. They fired in coordinated bursts, dropping the first wave of approaching crew. But more followed, relentless and unnaturally strong in their possessed state. We can't hold them all, Farouk shouted, using a heavy wrench to fend off a junior engineer whose face was distorted by an inhuman snarl. Inside the core, Felia had entered a state of deep communion. Her consciousness expanded outward, interfacing with the ship's systems on a level beyond electronic communication. She could feel the parasite's presence, ancient, hungry, and increasingly desperate as it sensed her intrusion. You cannot stop us, it communicated directly into her mind. We are eternity. We are the void between stars. We have consumed civilizations while your ancestors still crawled from primordial seas. Felia did not waste energy on words. Instead, she channeled the dimensional currents through herself, creating a resonance pattern that rippled outward. The parasite recoiled wherever the pattern touched it, its psychic scream intensifying. Outside the core, the infected crew suddenly faltered, clutching their heads in shared pain. Riza seized the opportunity, pulling Vasquez and Farouk behind a console as a makeshift barricade. Whatever she's doing, it's working. He shouted over the mental wailing that seemed to permeate the ship itself. Inside the core, Felia pushed herself further, her physical form beginning to destabilize under the strain. The dimensional resonance grew stronger, but the parasite fought back with the desperation of an ancient predator facing extinction. Memories not her own flooded Thalia's consciousness, civilizations consumed, minds enslaved, worlds left empty as the void courier moved on. And behind it all, a profound and terrible loneliness, the hunger of something that could never truly connect with the life it consumed. "We are not so different," the parasite whispered insidiously. "Both travelers between worlds, both alone among alien minds." "No," Thalia responded, finding her voice despite the overwhelming pressure. "I choose connection. You choose consumption." With a final surge of effort, she released the full force of the dimensional resonance. The core pulsed with blinding light, and a shockwave of pure energy radiated outward through the ship. The infected crew collapsed like puppets with cut strings. The viscous substance coating walls and equipment blackened and crumbled into dust. Throughout the Monarch, the parasite's presence dissipated in a final psychic scream that left every conscious mind aboard momentarily dazed. When the light faded, Thalia floated in the core, her luminescence barely visible, her form transparent to the point of near invisibility. "Get her out of there," Riza shouted, rushing forward. Farouk quickly re-established the containment field and opened the access point. Thalia drifted through it like a ghost, collapsing into Riza's arms as gravity reasserted its hold on her weakened form. "Did it work?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Vasquez checked the ship's systems, parasite presence dropping to undetectable levels, life support stabilizing. She looked up, genuine awe in her expression. She did it. Riza cradled Thalia's fading form. "Stay with us, Sparkles." "That's an order." The weak flicker of amusement lit her compound eyes. "I don't take orders from humans." "Then consider it a personal request," he said softly. "From a friend." Her luminescence pulsed once in acknowledgement before she slipped into unconsciousness. 3 weeks later, Thalia stood at the observation deck of the Monarch, watching as the ship approached the neutral transfer point where a Luminiad vessel waited. Her strength had returned slowly, her luminescence once again vibrant and flowing with complex patterns. She sensed Riza's approach before he spoke, the now familiar cadence of his footsteps, the particular electromagnetic signature of his presence that she had come to recognize. "So," he said, joining her at the viewport, "Colonel Brunswick is furious. Apparently having an alien prisoner save the entire ship creates uncomfortable diplomatic precedents. Your superiors prefer simple narratives," Thalia observed. "Friend or foe, ally or enemy." "Yeah, well, reality's messier than that." He leaned against the railing. "The official report says you were granted temporary supervised release to assist with a scientific anomaly. Very boring, very by the book. And unofficially," Riza smiled, "unofficially, half the crew wants to throw you a party. And Farouk says if you ever want a job as a dimensional engineer, he'd hire you in a heartbeat." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. The Monarch still bore scars from its encounter with the parasite, sections sealed off for decontamination, systems undergoing repair, crew members recovering from their ordeal. But it survived, and so had they. "Your people will continue to view us with suspicion," Thalia said finally. "As will mine." "Probably," Reza agreed. "Old fears die hard. Yet here we stand. Different species, different perceptions." Her luminescence shifted to a warm, steady blue, but seeing the same stars. "You know," Reza said thoughtfully, "in our history, some of humanity's greatest explorations began with simple curiosity rather than grand diplomatic missions. Individual connections, not treaties." "A first step," Thalia agreed. The communication system chimed, announcing their arrival at the transfer coordinates. The Luminiad vessel was visible now, an elegant construct of crystalline material and living energy, as different from the utilitarian lines of the Monarch as Thalia was from Riza. "I've been authorized to return your navigation equipment," Reza said, producing a small container containing her tools. "Technically, they're being classified as personal effects rather than confiscated technology." More of those diplomatic semantics. Thalia accepted the container with a graceful inclination of her head. "Thank you, Lieutenant Nazari." "Riza," he corrected. "I think we've earned a first-name basis after saving each other's lives." "Riza," she echoed, the name chiming musically in her voice. As they walked toward the shuttle bay for the transfer, Riza hesitated. "I'm not very good at formal goodbyes." "Then perhaps not a goodbye," Thalia suggested. "The dimensional currents flow in patterns, not straight lines. Those who travel them often find themselves returning to unexpected connections." Riza smiled. "I like the sound of that." At the shuttle bay, Colonel Brunswick and other officers waited with formal expressions and rigid postures. The official handover would be conducted according to precise protocols, with careful documentation and diplomatic language. But as Thalia prepared to board the shuttle that would return her to her people, she turned once more to Riza. "When you look at the stars," she said softly, "remember that I am looking at them too, from a different angle, but with the same wonder." "Count on it, Sparkles," he replied with a grin. "Count on it." Her luminescence flared briefly in response, a pattern Riza had come to recognize as laughter, before she turned and boarded the shuttle, carrying with her not just her returned equipment, but something far more valuable: the proof that understanding could exist between different worlds, if only someone was willing to try. As the shuttle departed, Riza watched until it was nothing more than a distant point of light among the stars. He couldn't help but wonder where the dimensional currents might lead next, and whether they might someday flow full circle. Behind him, the Monarch hummed with renewed purpose, ready to continue its journey through the vastness of space, a vastness that suddenly seemed a little less empty, a little less cold, and filled with far more possibilities than before.